this point, I feel like it's basic to like this book, but if this is basic, then like hand me a pumpkin spice latte and give me some Uggs because I'm a basic bitch. Hi besties, welcome and happy end of 2021. I don't know about you, but it has been an incredibly long and challenging year for me, and I'm very excited to be moving on to a brand new year. I get very reflective and introspective at the end of each year, and for me, the biggest benchmark of this year has been starting this YouTube channel. What better way to finish out the year than talking to you about all the books that I read this year. I'm gonna give you my favorite books that I read this year. But first, we have to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is GlassesUSA.com. By cutting out the middleman altogether, GlassesUSA.com offers over 9,000 prescription glasses and sunglasses from in-house brands, designer brands, at up to 70% off the retail price. So you can shop for all your eyewear needs online at affordable prices, starting at just $30 with basic prescription lenses included. GlassesUSA.com offers a completely risk-free shopping experience with free shipping and returns and a 100% money-back guarantee. If you're feeling at all overwhelmed by the amount of choices that they offer, they have a really easy 1-minute long quiz that'll help you find your perfect pair of glasses based on your face shape and what you need in your eyewear. My favorite thing about Glasses USA is that they offer a huge range of advanced blue light blocking glasses, which is what I'm wearing right now. As a content creator, I spend a ton of time looking at screens, which is why blue light glasses have completely changed the game for me. A super helpful tool is their virtual try-on. I never know what frame shape to get for my face, what color to get for my skin tone, but because of their virtual try-on, I felt so much more confident with my purchases. First, I got these, which are blue light blocking glasses. This is the Atoto Bologna frame. I never want to take them off, but I will to show you the other glasses I got. I also really needed a pair of sunglasses. They give me a dangerous amount of confidence, okay? And then the last pair I actually got as a gift for my sweet mom. So these are my mom's glasses. I'm just modeling them for you so you can see the Muse frames. So if you or any of your loved ones need glasses, prescription or otherwise, GlassesUSA.com has you completely covered. You can click my link at the top of the description and you can find my glasses online by signing up for 65% off your first pair. I hope you enjoy. So let's talk about my favorite books that I read this year. Now, in this list, I'm not gonna be including books that I reread because I did reread a few favorites this year, but I'm just gonna be talking about books that I read for the first time this year. I have 10 books and then a few poetry collections to talk about. This year, I discovered Wendy Cope for the first time, and now she's easily one of my favorite poets. I read her collection, Serious Concerns, and highly recommend it. I thought it was so wonderful. It's sort of disarmingly simple. She just makes normal thoughts that you would have on any given day feel really beautiful and lovely. And I love that sort of I love that sort of romanticization of the normal and the everyday and the ordinary. That just really strikes a chord with me, and I loved her poetry for that reason. I also read Blue Horses by Mary Oliver. She writes mainly through the lens of nature and using nature as a tool to explore different ideas and themes. Reading this collection was just sort of a way to cement that Mary Oliver is one of my favorite poets. So I really enjoyed that. I also read Howl by Allen Ginsberg. My two favorite Allen Ginsberg poems are Sunflower Sutra and America, which are both featured in Howl. So shout out to those poems in particular. Now let's get into my top 10 favorite books of the year. These are in order, sort of, on a basic upward trend of how much I enjoyed them. I want you to comment down below your prediction for my top favorite book right now before we get into them. And if you get it right, you'll get 20 points. Number 10 on my list is Franny and Zooey by J.D. Salinger. I really enjoyed this short novella, and I liked it a lot more than I remember liking Catcher in the Rye, so I was glad that I gave J.D. Salinger another chance. This follows a young college student named Franny as she sort of has a nervous breakdown, and her older brother Zooey tries to help her through it. It spans really only about 24 hours, and they talk about their religious philosophies and the way in which their family trauma and grief has shaped them. I just thought it was such a great exploration of a sibling relationship. I don't know why it gets so much less buzz than The Catcher in the Rye, because I thought it was better. Next on my list is A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. This book was just one of the best books that I read this year. Very well crafted. There were certain lines in this book that I had to stop and just read again and then read again because they were so affecting to me. A Thousand Splendid Suns follows two women in Afghanistan in the late 70s through the early 90s. While Afghanistan is suffering from political turmoil and attacks, and they're grappling with what it means to be a woman in Afghanistan. It's just an incredibly powerful story of womanhood and friendship and connection. Next on my list is Slow Days, Fast Company, The World, The Flesh, and LA by Eve Babbitt. This book was so much fun to read. Like, I did not want to put it down once I started. Slow Days, Fast Company is sort of biographical fiction in that it's based on Eve Babbitt's true real experiences, but she's fictionalized elements of it. This one in particular follows her through a few of her different relationships she experienced in the 60s in LA. The setting is so immaculately laid out that the time period and the place become their own characters in the book that are just as important as the actual people that you're reading about. There were things about her explanation of womanhood that I have rarely seen written about in such an honest and true way in other books, and I really connected with that aspect of it. And I also just felt so cool while reading it. Like, it really fed my intellectual superiority complex. If I lived in a big city, I would take this book on every train route there was to make myself feel as though I was better than everyone. If that's what you're looking for, Eve Babbitt, everyone. Next on my list is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I was kind of surprised this made it onto the list, but this book really took me by surprise. It follows a young woman named Kaya, who everyone around her calls the Marsh Girl because she lives on her own in the marshland of the North Carolina Outer Banks region. Ever since she was a child, she's been by herself. She's had to raise herself, educate herself, find food for herself, and just survive. So it's part survival story, but things get complicated when Kaya becomes the main suspect of a murder after a body washes up in the marsh. This book just really explores solitude and talks about the few people that Kaya chooses to let in and why. Because so much of it feels like it is just you and Kaya, you become really connected to her really quickly. The description and portrayal of the marshland in the South was just so perfect. It's my favorite place in the world. And so to have a book that so wonderfully captures it that I can return to if I'm ever missing the marshland is such a gift, and I thought it was great. Coming in at number 6 on my list is The Overstory by Richard Powers. Who knew that a book about trees could slice me and dice me and cut me open and scoop out my insides and throw them on the floor and then spit on them and stomp on them and then put them back inside me all mixed and jumbled up? I don't really know what I just said, but this book ruined me is what I was trying to convey with that sentence. That was graphic, I'm sorry. The first half of this book reads more like a short story collection than the beginning of a novel because you're introduced to all of the different characters that you need to know and their own personal backstories. And then in the second half of the book, they all begin to interconnect and weave around each other in a way that was so satisfying. I couldn't put it down. I had to keep reading. I couldn't see through my tears, but I had to keep reading. I think about this book every time I look at a tree, which is often. Every time I go on a walk, every time I go to a park, I think about all the cool shit that I learned while reading this book. One of the main storylines in this book is about tree sitters and activists against deforestation. In another life, aka 2 years ago, I was a climate activist. I organized sit-ins and strikes and protests at city hall meetings and things of that nature. And I appreciated so much the way these characters talked about the actions that they were doing and their motivation because it captured so much of what I felt when I was doing that work. If you're passionate about climate change, if you're passionate about literally being able to walk outside and have a world to look at, if you like to breathe, then I think you'll appreciate this book. You know, this honestly maybe should be higher on the list now that I'm talking about it. I don't know. I don't know what my own opinions are. At number 5 on my list is Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. I really loved this one. I thought it was so beautiful. This book made me cry on multiple occasions, and I feel like it captured so well what it's like to be a young adult and like navigating the beginnings of adulthood in our current time, which is just fraught with shit, our generation really can't catch a break. We keep bearing the brunt of all of the garbage that the generations before us have left. And this book touches on that a lot. And that I felt deep within my soul. I loved all of the characters in this book. They were all fleshed out. They didn't feel like caricatures or stereotypes, but they were still different enough from one another. If you're new here, you may not know that in my spare time, I actually drive the Sally Rooney fan club party bus. We have a blast. We have a fun time. Welcome. This book follows two best friends, Alice and Eileen, as they're both experiencing budding relationships with men and career troubles and just living life in the shit show that was 2019 into 2020. I thought it was really great. Just like Sally Rooney's other books, it's very slice of life. It's not very plot heavy. It's basically just about two women living their lives, and that is something that I can always relate to. Sally Rooney does it again, folks. Coming in at number 4 on my list is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I've read all of John Green's books, so I thought I knew sort of what to expect, but this one really blew me away. It's his first foray into nonfiction. It's a book of essays, and each essay is framed as a review out of 5 stars of something in the Anthropocene, which is the era of the world in which humans have existed. So he reviews anything from the Nathan's Famous hot dog eating contest to the internet to sunsets. In some ways it feels very memoir-like. He definitely allows his personal life and experiences to bleed into these reviews and to talk about how these things have shaped and affected him. He also just dives into such interesting and weird topics with a deftness that I've only ever seen John Green wield. I'm sure some people find John Green's writing saccharine, but I know for me, with almost every single one of these essays, I walked away with a little bit more hope and joy than I had been feeling when I started it. And that is such a gift to be able to put in a book. Overall, I just think this book was so great, and it was filled with a lot of wisdom, and I loved it. Okay, now we are getting into the top 3 books. I'm very excited. At number 3, I have The Prince of Tides by Pat Conroy. This brick of a book ruined my life for the 2 weeks that I was reading it. I thought about nothing but this book. I felt nothing but dread and anxiety. It did make me physically nauseous at one point, and that being said, it was one of my favorite books that I read this year. This book is definitely non-linear storytelling. It follows 2 sort of timelines. One, as the Wingo children are growing up and experiencing traumatic events in their childhood in the low country of South Carolina. And the present day timeline follows Tom Wingo as he is an adult and his twin sister has been institutionalized. And Tom kind of holds the key to figuring out what traumas are causing her so much pain. This book is about family trauma, grief, being a sibling, growing up in the South. It is just filled with so much that I recognized. I have rarely read writing this good. I can already tell that this is going to be one of those books that I reread every couple of years, like for the rest of my life. As awful and horrid as this reading experience was, I didn't want it to end because I cared so deeply about these characters. The back cover says, Pat Conroy has created a huge, brash thunderstorm of a novel, stinging with honesty and resounding with drama. And I feel like that is just the perfect description of what this book is. This and all of the books that I ever mention on my channel, I highly encourage you to look up trigger warnings before you dive in, because there's definitely content, especially in this book, that could be incredibly upsetting or triggering to people, and I want you to take care and be responsible while reading. This was one of those books that I finished and was like, I cannot believe somebody wrote that. I cannot believe that somebody took a pen and wrote that. Baffling. At number 2, I have Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. I just read this a couple weeks ago, and I have been fighting the urge ever since to go to the bookstore and buy every other Kurt Vonnegut book that they sell. I'm still at a loss for intelligent things to say about this book because I loved it so much. It's an anti-war book. It follows Billy Pilgrim, who is experiencing intense PTSD after being present for the Dresden firebombing. His PTSD takes lots of different forms, including a tendency for time traveling. Billy Pilgrim just sort of experiences his life as a disjointed and non-linear thing. As a coping mechanism, he develops in his mind this alien race that abducts him, that is a direct metaphor for his captors when he was a prisoner of war. This book so realistically dives into the horrors of war, and unlike a lot of other war books I've read, it leaves out the false false patriotism, the sort of call to action to serve your country, and just focuses on the horrors of what actually happens at war. It's also so funny in such a dark way. I really loved the kind of humor that Vonnegut used in this book. This might sound really strange, but this nonlinear, disjointed, time-jumping sort of narrative clicked so well in my brain, like Legos. Like, I was so much less distracted reading this book than I often get when I read linear stories. It's so short, but it packs such an incredible punch. This is one of my favorite books of all time, and I will be reading a lot more Kurt Vonnegut next year. Just you wait and see. If I could ever write something half as good as this book, I would consider my life a success. The last one is surprising to me because I literally forgot that I read it this year. I thought I had read it last year, which proves how long 2021 has been. But I don't think it'll come as a surprise to any of you because my favorite book of this year was Normal People by Sally Rooney. I cannot believe I read this year. Part of that is because it's so well written and I cared so deeply about the characters that I feel like they've been in my life for so long. They introduced me to this sort of Sally Rooney-esque genre that is so popular right now. Depressed young people grappling with the outside world. You would think I would get enough of that in my own life. For whatever reason, I like to get even more of it in my reading. I have rarely, if ever, in my life related to a character as deeply as I related to Connell Waldron. The portrayal of his mental illness and anxiety and like intrusive thoughts, I mean, it was like somebody took a mirror and was like, hey bitch. This book just felt like somebody took my stupid little inconsequential thoughts, pulled them out of my head, put them in a book, and made them important. Is there a plot to this book? Not really. Do I care? Not at all. There was one scene in this book that made me lie on the floor and like heave. That's an embarrassing thing to admit on the internet where it will live forever, but it's true. There's a scene in which Connell is in a waiting room waiting to begin therapy, and I laid on the ground and said, I'm gonna throw up. Because I've lived this scene of a novel that was written by somebody who I've never met before and certainly have never told about that experience. And it's, you know, it's one of those weird kind of like scary feelings where you realize that you are not unique. And in fact, your experiences that you have thought make you unique and interesting are in some ways widely universal and lots of other people have experienced them. But it's also that feeling realizing that those experiences in which you felt very alone, you're not alone. You know, you're not the one person out of 7.5 billion people that has had that thought before. But like you forget, because that's just our way as human beings to like put ourselves at the center of the universe and be like, nobody else has ever thought this interesting and nuanced thing before because I'm the only one, whatever. Sally Rooney said, no, bitch, you're not the only one. But you're also not alone. At its root, it's really just about how people can affect you and change you and shape your life. You guys, I just really love this book. Duh, obviously, I never shut up about it. I think I've mentioned it in every video I've ever posted. And just like Slaughterhouse 5, this isn't just my favorite book I read this year. This is maybe my favorite book I've ever read. It is one of my favorite books of all time. Those are the books. Those are the top 10 books that I read this year. In my humble opinion, the fact that any of you care about my opinion baffles me every single day, but thank you so much for caring. Thank you so much for subscribing. But I have a ridiculous amount of plans and video ideas coming up in 2022. You should definitely hit the subscribe button down below so you don't miss all of those. You got a big storm coming as a subscriber to Sally Timms. Like this video, please comment down below what your favorite books of 2021 were. That's all for this year, folks. Thank you so much to GlassesUSA.com for sponsoring this video. You can find my link in the top of the description. And in case you haven't heard it today, I love you. Happy New Year.